evening, everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Good evening, gentlemen.
What's
Good
up?
evening.
How you doing tonight?
I'm gonna always start off with an accent. You leave me alone.
I know
You have said some of the worst things in an accent on this channel.
I know you went
Don't
Count
give me
Chocula
yeah.
again. It's
That's
totally
true.
fine.
Yeah,
That's true.
Bertha Blithers.
All right there,
whatever
Count
the hell her
Dracula.
name is. I'm doing fantastic tonight. I'm ecstatic. We found out right before we went on air that we are ranked number 5 out of the best paranormal podcasts to follow. In Texas, yes, but I'm going to take the first part of it.
Take the win. Take the win.
Texas is a big state.
It is. We're ranked number 5 out of the top paranormal podcasts to follow in Texas. So I think that is fantastic. So I'm doing great tonight. And then we got a great story that I've never heard of. I'm excited to hear about
You've
these
never
brothers.
heard our story tonight.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So
Nope.
I'm excited.
Blake, you don't have the sound loaded up on your soundboard. Number 5, baby.
We've never had that sound loaded up on our
No,
soundboard,
never.
Brian. So I don't know where that came from, but that's cool. We'll roll with it.
Yeah, there you go. I foleyed it. I foleyed it for you. There you go.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So Blake hasn't heard this story that we're going to get into tonight, and Ryan, you haven't either. So this is new
No.
territory for both of you.
This is uncharted territory. I'm excited.
Well, I'm going to tell you that by the end of the episode tonight, my OCD will be in full hardcore overdrive. My germophobia is going to
God.
be through the roof. I had nightmares last night whenever I was putting the final touches on this because of the story I'm about to tell you. And I am going to warn you that we are going to show a police case photograph that depicts someone that is no longer living. And it is quite gruesome. So, and I will warn you right before that comes up, but it's necessary to show you this in order for you to understand.
Oh, sorry. Wrong time. My
Wrong
bad.
time.
So when you say germophobia and OCD, are you going to go like full Howard Hughes after this?
Yeah, probably. I'll probably have to scrub my skin off. Yeah.
Okay.
So, gentlemen, let's get into our story tonight. And it is about the infamous Collyer Brothers. Okay. So here we go. So Harlem at the turn of the 20th century was very different from the one that people picture today. The brownstones were beautiful and well kept. The sidewalks were wide and the streets were lined with trees. And it was before the Great Depression and before Harlem became known for jazz music and nightlife. And in those days, it was being developed as a fashionable residential district for the well-to-do. Families with old New York money were moving uptown, away from the crush of downtown Manhattan, looking for a place where their wealth and respectability would have room to breathe. Now, in the heart of Harlem, at the northwest corner of 128th Street and Fifth Avenue, stood a brownstone that became a legend, but not for its architecture, and not for the glamorous lives its owners once led, but for the strange, tragic, and almost unbelievable fate of the two men who lived and died there. Now, the building at 2078 Fifth Avenue belonged to the Collyer family, and it was impressive. 4 stories tall with elegant stoops and high windows, and it was a grand symbol of stability, wealth, and prominence. And behind those walls lived Dr. Herman Livingston Collyer, his wife Susie, and their 2 sons, Homer and Langley. Now, from the outside, it seemed like a household that was destined for success. The father was a well-respected physician, the sons were bright, and the family name carried weight. But appearances are deceiving. Now, the Collyers looked like any upper-middle-class New York family. All were educated, respectable, and cultured. But behind the closed doors, small quirks became rigid routines. Routines became obsessions, and those obsessions would consume the whole house and the occupants within. And the line between ordinary and extraordinary would collapse, leaving one man dead, one man missing, and a story that is truly stranger than fiction. Interested?
Maybe a little bit.
So, Dr. Herman Livingston Collyer was a well-known gynecologist who taught at Bellevue Hospital, and he had an office in Manhattan. And he came from old stock. The Livingston name had ties to one of New York's oldest families. His wife, Susie Gage Frost, was a former opera singer, and she was proud, educated, and extremely protective of her position in society. And Susie was also a descendant of the Livingston family. In fact, she and her husband were first cousins.
Oh, great.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Extra teeth and toes for the children. Sorry.
That's horrible, Ryan.
Yeah,
Now, in 1880, Herman and Susie welcomed their first child, a little girl they named Susan. But sadly, the child passed away at only 4 months old.
No.
But in 1881, the couple had a second child. Sorry, I was going to say did it a second time, apparently. Sorry.
I heard had a second kind. I was like, what the fuck did they have?
No, it's just, words are hard, okay? But, but in 1881, the couple had a second child, Homer Les Collyer. 4 years later, in 1885, Langley Wakeman Collyer followed. And the brothers had a privileged childhood. They had access to fine education, music lessons, books, and all the opportunities a family of means could provide. And the boys were intelligent and ambitious. Homer was accepted to the College of the City of New York as a sub-freshman at the age of 14. And he went on to Columbia University, where he studied law and became a maritime lawyer. Now, Langley attended Columbia as well and studied engineering and chemistry, though Columbia later claimed to have no record of his attendance. But Langley's true passion was music, and he became a self-styled musician and a concert pianist with long flowing hair, which was a rarity in that era. And Langley was so good that he even performed at Carnegie Hall. Also, the younger brother had a curious mind. Langley dabbled in invention, creating devices, and even created one to vacuum the insides of pianos, and later attempted to adapt a Model T Ford engine to generate electricity. Now, in their 20s, the brothers were traveling in elite circles. They were two young men in tailored suits, confident and sharp. Homer, serious and deliberate with a lawyer's mind for precision. And Langley, more artistic, his long fingers gliding across piano keys in a recital hall. And neighbors looked at them with admiration. The young men had promising futures and seemed destined for fame. But there was another side to the Collyer household, a side that hinted at trouble. Now, Dr. Collyer was also brilliant, but profoundly eccentric. And his quirkiness was noticed in the neighborhood. Every day, instead of taking the streetcar or a carriage to work, he paddled his canoe down the East River to the city hospital on Blackwell Island. Briefcase in tow.
I thought you were about to say he paddled his canoe down the street.
That is very eccentric.
Yeah, taking his briefcase with him. And he always paddled with calm determination through the water until he arrived at the hospital, sometimes soaking wet if the weather turned against him. And when it was time to go home, the doctor would carry it on his head through the streets back to his home. But to him, this wasn't strange. It was efficient. It was logical. He loved his nautical habits so much that he kept his yacht moored at the Columbia Yacht Club, often spending more time on the water than at home. Patients and colleagues saw him as dedicated, but his family felt he was less than devoted to them. Now, if Herman was eccentric, Susie was formidable. At home, Susie Collyer was no less unusual. She was refined and cultured and deeply stubborn. She dressed formally, even inside the house, and filled the air with opera. And she had her own peculiarities. She discouraged her boys from mingling too much with others, fearing the corruption of outside influences. She believed the Collyers were descended from a nobler stock than those who surrounded them. And she raised Homer and Langley with a sense of both privilege and distance. Sorry, I lost my place in my script. My apologies.
Just
That's okay.
That's okay. I found it now.
With the neighborhood riffraff.
That's right.
Homer.
She wanted to know where her boys were and who they were talking to. And she believed fiercely in the superiority of her family's traditions and resisted any changes to her surroundings. Some suggested that her perfectionism and pride created a home where eccentricity was not only tolerated, but cultivated. And she carried herself with dignity, sometimes to the point of alienating others. And as Harlem shifted and diversified, and the new neighbors moved in, Susie clung even harder to her sense of social hierarchy. And she rarely stooped to socializing with neighbors that she considered beneath her. And neighbors would later remember her as a woman who carried herself with aristocratic airs, even when her household had begun to fall into despair. And she made the Collyer household a fortress of old ways in a changing city. And these eccentricities, individually, amongst the family members, might have been charming in a different family, but all culminated together. They created tension. Dr. Collyer was aloof. He seemed more interested in his yacht and professional prestige than his family. Susie was demanding and rigid and fiercely protective of her sons. And for Homer and Langley, this meant growing up in a house that was privileged and claustrophobic, full of expectations, but lacking any real warmth. By 1909, the tension broke. Herman left the brownstone. He moved into a small apartment downtown, abandoning Susie and the boys. The reason? No one really knows. Some theorized that Susie's dominance made the household unbearable, while others believed Herman simply preferred freedom and a quieter life. But more disturbing was a rumor that Susie had told him to leave when the good doctor wanted to move some of his Bellevue patients from the hospital to the house so he could focus on their treatment.
What was it going to canoe him up the river to his house or something? Like,
Well, whatever the reason, the departure fractured the family. And when the good doctor left, he took all the things that he valued the most, like his medical equipment and his nautical items, including the canoe. And it was as if he was determined to move all traces of himself from the home. Now, for Homer and Langley, their father's abandonment devastated them. They leaned harder on their mother, and she in turn leaned harder on them. And the world outside became less inviting and more uncertain. The family's brownstone was no longer just a house. It became a place to retreat and to hide from disappointment. Now, when Dr. Herman Collyer walked out in 1909, he left more than just an empty chair at the dinner table. He left a void, and that void shaped everything that followed. Homer and Langley were both in their 20s, but the experience of being abandoned by their father plunged them into a new role as protectors and companions to their mother. And Susie was not a woman who accepted change easily. Her husband's departure embarrassed her and humiliated her. Divorce was a mark of shame, and to admit that your husband had left was to admit failure in the most public of ways. So Susie doubled down on appearances. The brownstone became not just her home, but a symbol of respect that she was determined to uphold. Her sons, bright and loyal, became her sentinels. And the three lived together in the tall, elegant house as Harlem itself was changing. And in the early 1910s, more and more African American families began moving into the neighborhood. And this was part of what would become known as the Great Migration. And Harlem was transforming into the cultural heart of Black America, the place where jazz, literature, and art flourished. But Susie resisted these changes. She closed her social circle and entertained few visitors. For Homer and Langley, this meant their world became even more small. They spent less time outside, less time with friends, and more time focused on their mother. Homer practiced law, but he didn't socialize with his colleagues after hours. And Langley performed on the piano, but his career never really blossomed in the way it might have if he'd pursued it more independently. And instead, the brothers circled around Susie, dutifully and devoted. Now, go ahead.
I don't understand why they feel so abandoned by their father. He's only across town. They can take a streetcar to go see him.
Or a canoe.
Yeah, that too. Or canoe across town.
In looking at this, it seems like he, in everything I read and everything I found about him, seems like he just went, I'm done, and he just was gone.
Right.
He went out for, a pack of cigarettes and he never came home. Nobody ever knew where he went. Now, they knew where he was. They knew where he was, but he didn't have time for his family.
Okay.
So I think that they just I think that he just left and was gone. Even though he was close, he made no effort.
It was understood that he's over there and we don't need to go see him.
Yeah, that he's over there and we're over here and this is where we stay and that's where he stays. That's kind of, I think you're right on it. That's kind of what I got around this.
Oh, okay.
Now, around 1917, the brothers had their telephone disconnected after disputing charges for long-distance calls they claimed they never made. And rather than resolve the issue, they simply severed the line. They weren't going to argue with him. They're like, snap, cut it off.
It's kind of hard for a lawyer to practice without a telephone. What's he doing? Like communicating via carrier pigeon?
Yeah,
that would be the equivalent of the modern times back in the early 2000s. If you had a cell phone where it's like, no, I didn't download 500, bucks worth of ringtones. No, that wasn't me.
Right.
I only talk after 9 o'clock on my cell phone, damn it. That was not me.
Well, Dr. Collyer died in 1923. And by then, he had long since separated from Susie and the boys, leaving them to carry on at the Fifth Avenue house. And his death left Homer and Langley with only their mother for company. By 1928, their gas service had been shut off. Not because they were in financial hardship. They just stopped paying the bill. And soon after that, they gave up running water and steam heat. Instead, they lit their rooms with kerosene lamps, cooked over small stoves, and fetched water from a public fountain 4 blocks away. I ain't drinking no public fountain water. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that right off the bat.
I'm listen, this is
especially in New York City.
Yeah, this is gonna sound very first world problem, but I ain't letting my water get cut off.
Right.
No.
I literally saw a dude wash his ass in the fountain in New York City. I'm not drinking.
No, thank you.
I'm good.
Now, we're gonna go ahead and move on from that.
Yeah, please. We already know how I do whenever we talk about this nasty crap.
Now, despite these changes, to the world outside, they still seemed respectable. And when approached, they were courteous and well-mannered and cultured and a little shy. But no one was ever permitted inside their home. And behind the closed doors, the withdrawal deepened. Now, in 1929, Susie Collyer died as well. She was 73 years old. And for most families, the loss of a parent, especially one as strong-willed as Susie, while it would have been devastating, it would also have been freeing. And most adult children would have, having done their duty, would have stepped out into the world, started families of their own, and reshaped their lives. But for Homer and Langley, it was the opposite. When Susie died, something shifted. Without her presence, the brothers no longer even attempted to maintain the presence of normalcy. Her death sealed them in. The brownstone on Fifth Avenue was no longer their mother's fortress. It was theirs. And instead of opening its doors to the world, they closed them even tighter. And they withdrew from social life almost completely. And the home became a shrine to memories, to safety, and to control. And Homer continued to work for attorney John R. McMullen, who had become the family's legal advisor. And later, he worked at the city title insurance, conducting research at the Hall of Records. And he was remembered as a polite, precise, even old-fashioned in his manners. He dressed in 19th century attire, presenting a Victorian appearance. But Langley, he seemed content to be adrift. He did have a job at a piano store, but for the most part, he just spent his time tinkering with odd projects or playing at the piano. And by the 1930s, the Collyers' world had grown increasingly strange. At some point during those years, the West 77th Street home, where their father, Dr. Herman Collyer, had once lived, was sold. And the new owner, a Mrs. Peter Meyer, hired workmen to clean out its neglected basement. And what they discovered seemed more like the plot of a tall tale than a real estate inconvenience. In the basement of the home was an intact Model T Ford, hidden beneath the layers of dust and debris.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Yeah. Now, how it had gotten there was anybody's guess. The narrow stairways and cramped entrances made it almost inconceivable that the vehicle had been driven or even lowered into the place. It was as if the Collyers' eccentric father, or perhaps Langley himself, had set about one of his impossible projects and abandoned it halfway through. So Mrs. Meyer, having no use for the rustic relic, she paid a workman $150 to dismantle the car and carry the pieces to the street for disposal. But Langley found out, and the thought of strangers carting off what had once been his father's treasure was intolerable. So piece by piece, he retrieved the Model T from the curbside, hauling gears and axles, frame and fenders back across Harlem to the 5th Avenue brownstone.
Damn.
And he reassembled it in the basement, where it would sit amongst his growing labyrinth of possessions. Now, this was not merely sentimental madness. It was a functional obsession.
Mm-hmm.
The house had no electricity, and Langley, an engineer by education, if not by profession, had hatched a plan. He was going to connect a generator to the Model T's engine, hoping to power the brownstone from the gutted remains of the car. The attempt failed, but the car remained. One more massive object swallowed by the growing clutter. So he drags his car off the street and he's going to put it back together in the basement.
Right.
But he had a reason. He was going to use it to generate electricity for the house.
I mean, that's impressive to drag a whole motor, let alone a whole ass vehicle across New York City that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Now, in 1932, Homer purchased the building across the street at 2077 Fifth Avenue for $8,000. He intended to divide it into apartments for rent. But the plan never really materialized. In 1933, tragedy struck. Homer suffered a massive stroke. Hemorrhages in both of his eyes left him blind.
Oh, shit.
And from that point onward, Homer would never again walk the streets of New York. He became a recluse, confined to the decaying brownstone. And this was the turning point.
Our
Go
people
ahead.
that are on the comments, we got G's, and my wife complains about all my camping and paranormal gear in the basement.
That's funny.
Y'all are killing me tonight with these
Well,
comments. Sorry.
you're about to get a real reprieve from her. Okay, here we go.
All right.
So, except for one exception, Homer was never seen outside the walls of the home again. And Homer, once a lawyer with sharp eyes for contracts and arguments, became entirely dependent on Langley. And Langley rose to the occasion in his own eccentric way. Langley devoted himself to his brother's care. He abandoned his music and his job, and he turned to nursing Homer with a fierce, almost fanatical devotion. He refused to consult doctors. Instead, he relied on the medical text in their vast library. Langley consulted text after text after text until he devised the perfect remedy. Langley was convinced that he could cure Homer's blindness, not with doctors or specialists, but with his own regimen.
Uh-oh.
And the remedy really was bizarre. Langley began feeding Homer a diet of 100 oranges a week, black bread, and peanut butter. because he believed that the vitamin C would restore his eyesight. And he insisted that Homer kept his eyes closed at all times so they could rest.
He's blind. He doesn't have scurvy. Jesus Christ.
Also, Langley saved newspapers so that when Homer's vision returned, he could catch up on everything he missed. And he bought every single one, every day. Stacks upon stacks of papers began piling up, each one saved with the promise that someday you'll be able to read these again. Even though he read the paper to Langley every day. Langley read the paper to Homer every day. Now, by this time, Langley's compulsions had taken control on a monumental scale. Newspapers, magazines, cardboard boxes, barrels, tin cans, tree branches, scrap iron, broken appliances, everything he could haul home, he did. And in his mind, each item had a purpose. The newspapers especially were essential. He even told the neighbors and a few outsiders that he spoke to that he was going to, that way Langley was stacking up on the newspapers so that Homer could read them. And the newspapers stacked floor to ceiling, not just in one room, but across all 3 stories of the house. And by the 1930s, the brothers were almost entirely cut off, while the Great Depression deepened their isolation. Outside, Harlem was buzzing with life. Jazz clubs, rent parties, poets, and musicians filling the air with energy. But the Collyer brownstone was silent, except for Langley's piano and the occasional rustle of newspapers. Inside, it became a world frozen in time. And the brothers' daily life grew even stranger. Langley ventured out occasionally, always at odd hours. Night after night, he prowled the city streets, sometimes dragging a cart or sack to collect food or random items that he deemed treasures from the streets. Neighbors saw him shuffling along in ragged clothes, muttering to himself, carrying bundles of bread or cans. He rummaged through the garbage cans, scavenged from curbside piles, and though not poor, Langley even scavenged for food, begged butchers for scraps, and walked as far as Williamsburg, Brooklyn, to buy stale bread at the lowest possible cost.
Was that an actual picture of Langley?
That's Langley.
Oh, that's Langley. Oh, okay.
That's Langley.
Oh, wow.
Now, Langley's compulsive hoarding escalated, and he filled the house with newspapers, cardboard boxes. Every kind of debris came in. Homer, blind and increasingly frail, sat in a chair or lay in a bed, surrounded by walls of possessions. And as Homer's health worsened, Langley grew more defensive. He engineered the growing piles into structures, and he created mazes of boxes and crates and interlocking walls of debris that created hidden passageways and tunnels that only he knew. It was a fortress, a paranoid labyrinth designed to keep danger at bay. And the danger was real. Tales of hidden riches inside the house had tempted burglars, and there had been attempts to break in. And Langley responded with ingenuity and menace. He built booby traps from stacks of debris, rigged with tripwires designed to collapse on intruders. And he installed these traps throughout the house. He built tunnels through the clutter, narrow passageways, and only he could navigate them, leading from room to room. And to Langley, it was protection. And even inside the brownstone, the atmosphere changed. The curtains were drawn, the windows were shuttered, dust collected, rooms filled with boxes, furniture, instruments, clothing, mechanical parts, and of course, newspapers. Langley tinkered endlessly with contraptions. He dismantled pianos for spare wood and built makeshift devices to, again, try to generate electricity. Food was stockpiled, often bizarrely. Langley hoarded cans and stale bread, believing he could stretch out meals indefinitely. And the clutter. Oh, the clutter. By this point, it wasn't just clutter anymore. It was a labyrinth. Go ahead, Ryan. You were going to say something?
I said this dude sounds like a Batman villain.
Mm.
Like,
Got a lot of
all the-
people in the comments screaming "Home Alone."
right, with the booby traps and the labyrinth and everything else in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Freaking Kevin McAllister.
Yeah.
Now, in the house, pianos, plural, pianos were stacked on top of each other. Rusting
Mhm.
bicycles lean against towers of boxes. Tin cans, baby strollers, chandeliers, half disassembled radios. And again, still, more newspapers. And every room was jammed. Stairways became impassable. Whole floors disappeared under the weight of possessions. And he also saved random objects that he found useful in his mind. Each object to him had potential, and each was a piece of some future plan and part of some solution he just hadn't quite worked out yet. And Langley explained it all as necessity. He told curious neighbors that people were after him, criminals, thieves, and enemies. And the traps, the barricades, and the endless saving of objects were all part of his defense plan. He saw the world as hostile, unsafe, and predatory. And now the house was both castle and cage. And the brothers may have lived out their eccentricities. I can't say that word suddenly. Now, the brothers may have lived out their eccentricities in relative obscurity, had it not been for the press. In the mid-1930s, a real estate agent named Maurice Gruber tried to contact the brothers about farmland they owned in Queens, and his letters went unanswered. His knocks on the door were ignored. So he took to keeping vigil outside the house, and his frustration attracted the attention of reporter Helen Warden of the World Telegram. And Warden seized upon the brothers' silence, their decaying home, their old family name, and spun it into a story. In her article, she dubbed Langley the mystery man of Harlem. She repeated and perhaps embellished the rumors that already swirled that the house contained antique furnishings, priceless collections, and even vaults of cash that Langley refused to trust to the banks. And Warden herself stalked the Collyer home, watching for the ever-elusive Black brothers. And one evening she caught Langley venturing out for one of his nocturnal shopping trips. Approaching him, she asked about the legendary canoe that his father had once carried down Fifth Avenue, and about the Model T Ford rumored to be hidden in the basement. And to her surprise, Langley confirmed both stories. He offered no explanation and no clarification, just a strange, quiet acknowledgement of the absurd. And then he disappeared into the night. So rather than dispelling the mystery, her article fueled it, and other papers followed suit, repeating the lurid tales of the wealthy hermits hoarding treasure behind locked doors. And neighbors whispered. Curious onlookers banged on their doors, and children began to throw stones at the windows, breaking glass in hopes of glimpsing into the forbidden riches. And each time a window shattered, Langley carefully boarded it up, closing the house in further, sealing away the air and the light. Now, people claimed Langley owned the whole block and that secret tunnels ran under the brownstone. And their secrecy only fueled the speculation. And that speculation became legend. For Homer and Langley, their withdrawal turned them into neighborhood myths. They became the eccentric reclusives of Harlem, part reality and part folklore. And by the 1940s, the brothers were ghosts in Harlem. And that's what makes the story vaguely paranormal. Langley was occasionally spotted at night, pushing his cart down the street, hair wild and clothes ragged. But Homer was never seen at all. Children would dare each other to peek through the cracks in the shutters. Police occasionally knocked, usually over unpaid bills or complaints. But the brothers never let them in. The house sat dark and mysterious, a 4-story question mark looming over Fifth Avenue. And inside, day after day, Homer and Langley carried on. Blindness, paranoia, hoarding, routine. Their meals made of stale bread and canned goods, hours tinkering with broken machines, and walls that kept closing in tighter and tighter. April of 1939, armed with a court order, a city marshal and Consolidated Edison representative entered the brothers' 2 Fifth Avenue buildings and removed gas meters that had been unused since 1928. And a crowd of 1,000 gathered to watch, and Harlem buzzed with the spectacle of the hermits. Despite their efforts to avoid attention, the Collyers had become public figures. Now, Homer's final recorded appearance outside the house came not long after. On January 1st of 1940, Sergeant John Collins of the 123rd Street Police Station spotted the brothers hauling a massive tree limb into their basement. Homer, blind and frail, held one end, while Langley guided the other. It was both comic and tragic. 2 former men of promise, dragging the carcass of a tree into a house already drowning in debris. Their refusal to pay taxes and bills brought forth even more trouble. In August of 1942, the Bowery Savings Bank foreclosed on the $6,700 mortgage, unpaid since 1940, and the bank obtained permission to evict them. But the Collyers were not so easy dispossessed. Their loyal attorney, John R. McMullen, met with bank officials to negotiate. Langley himself, nearly a ghost by then, walked across the city in daylight to his attorney's office on Park Road to discuss the matter. The sight of him, gaunt and like he was from some other place in time, was unforgettable to those who witnessed it. And Attorney McMullen offered to repurchase the property. And the bank, realizing the house was nearly worthless in its decrepit condition, accepted the offer of repurchase and granted the brothers more time. Meanwhile, the rumors swirled in the neighborhood. People whispered that Homer had actually died inside and his body was rotting among the piles. So Sergeant John Collins of the 123rd Street Station took it upon himself to investigate. Now, he had long been fascinated by the brothers, and perhaps may have been genuinely concerned for their welfare. So Sergeant Collins investigated, and remarkably, he persuaded Langley to let him in through the basement. Now, the officer followed Langley through the basement, crawling through tunnels of trash, ducking under teetering piles of boxes, and brushing against walls of paper and rustling metal. He dodged tripwires that crossed the passages, designed to trigger avalanches of debris. And for half an hour, Collins inched deeper into the labyrinth until at last they reached an upstairs bedroom. And there, in the dim light of Collins' flashlight beam, he saw him. Homer Collyer. He found Homer sitting upright on a cot, draped in rags with a burlap sack beneath him and an old overcoat over his feet. His skin was ashen and his hair was wild. And then he spoke. "I am Homer Collins, a lawyer. I want your shield number. I am not dead. I am blind and paralyzed," Homer told him.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh at that part, but Jesus, it's like the whole time I was thinking this motherfucker's going to be dead when they walk up in here. It's just like, I am a Homer Collyer.
And everything I read said he said it with force and conviction as much as he could muster. That's what I read.
Oh, Lord. I was about to have a panic attack. Like there's going to be some mummy sitting up in a chair like, blah.
And I'm going to tell y'all, Sergeant Collins was shaken. The figure before him seemed less like a man and more like a mummy, animated by pure stubborn will. So he left the house with his proof of life, and then Langley filed a complaint against him afterward. but nothing ever came of it. And the Colliers withdrew deeper into their fortress. And by the early 1940s, the Bowery Savings Bank had grown weary of the Colliers' evasions. The bank was not to be put off indefinitely. And as the legal owner, the bank is still the legal owner of the 2078 Fifth Avenue. It was required to make repairs under city building and sanitary codes. And at the end of September, under pressure from the city agencies, the bank dispatched workmen to the property. The Department of Health had demanded urgent repairs to the crumbling structure. So the crew set about patching the facade, repairing the sagging stone cornice, and replacing shattered and missing windows, and hauling piles of junk from the rear yard. And as always, the sight of activity at the Collyer house drew a crowd. Police officers and patrol cars were sent to manage the onlookers. And from an upstairs window, Langley appeared, his hair wild and sharp voice cutting down to the workers. By what right, he demanded, do you trespass on my property? And the work halted. The contractor, unwilling to risk an arrest, left to fetch the official city order. And repairs resumed only when the papers were shown. But the battle was only beginning. The Bowery Savings Bank, go ahead.
You there, boy, I say, get off of my lawn.
Yeah.
No, I was about to say, it looks like it's like, you
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
But the battle was only beginning. The Bowery Savings Bank, patient though it had been, was not to be stalled forever. By 1942, the Collyer Brothers' habit of ignoring official notices, court summons, and tax demands had reached its breaking point. What had begun as eccentric neglect now drew the iron hand of the courts. And in August, Justice Bernard Bowden of the state Supreme Court issued an order permitting the city sheriff to evict the brothers from their once proud Fifth Avenue brownstone. Now, by October, the order was poised to be carried out. The bank had mailed notice after notice, but as ever, the Colliers never answered. And on November 19th, 1942, after repeated ignored notices, the bank requested the sheriff carry out the eviction order, by force if necessary. And at 10 a.m., a small army arrived, 2 deputy sheriffs, Police Captain Christian Zimmer of the 128th Street Division, Dr. Marshall Rose, the sheriff physician, bank representative John Redfield, locksmiths Joseph and Herman Cohen, and the Colliers' long-suffering attorney, John R. McMullen. The group pounded on the massive wooden front door for over an hour, but they got no reply. Outside, the neighbors and the thrill seekers pressed closer, murmuring and pointing. To Harlem, the Collyer house had become a haunted mansion, a living ruin of mystery and dread. Now, the locksmiths tried to force the corroded lock, but rust and age defeated them. So, moving to the rear, they removed the iron grill-covered basement door, only to find themselves blocked by a solid wall of wire netting, walls of crates, barrels, garbage cans, tin canisters, trunks, and rusted iron stacked from the floor to the ceiling. So they tried a third door, and the third door yielded the same. Now, covered in dust and frustration, the team returned to the front. And frustrated, Joseph Cohen scaled the front stoop, swung onto the ledge of the north high window, and forced open the shutters. And he smashed the window pane and climbed inside, choking on dust. Joseph Cohen was done playing. And what he saw was that the room was crammed with heaps of old sheet music, gilded picture frames, Christmas ornaments, broken plaster cherubs, piles of books, and garden baskets. Cohen and Deputy Murray worked their way downstairs. They cleared a narrow path to the front hall. They pushed deeper into the parlor, battling walls of debris. And in the gloom, they encountered still more barricades. And then again, they heard a weary voice emerge from the silence. What is the meaning of this? Deputy Murray replied, I have an eviction notice. Langley asked, "Is Mr. McMullen here?" And from behind the barricade, McMullen, the attorney, calls out, "They will put you out, Mr. Collyer, unless you keep the agreement." And there was a pause. Then Langley sighed. "Do what you think best." And then turning to the officer, he asked to borrow a pen. Now, uncertain, Deputy Murray passed a pen to Langley, who signed a check for the full amount owed and handed it to the officer. And just like that, the siege ended, and the crowd dispersed, cheated out of their spectacle.
That's
So it's not like they didn't have money. They
So
wrote it for-
anticlimactic.
I know.
It's like, we're gonna come in and pull you out, and they're just like,
He's like-
you know what's gonna happen is I'm pretty sure that they're like, you can't just write us a check, and they're like, no, I can't write a check. I can write a check.
No, they had money.
I'm just
That-
kidding.
Just so you know, the check was good.
He literally had a Winnie the Pooh reaction. Oh, bother.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. That's a very good description. It was just an annoyance. Things like everyday life were just an annoyance.
Mm.
But you see, the pattern was clear. Only the direct threat of force could pry money or even acknowledgement from the Colliers. Well, the reprieve was brief. In February 1943, the Internal Revenue Service came calling. Homer owed $1,900 in back income taxes plus 12 years of interest. If the tax bill was not paid,
shit.
yeah. And if the tax bill was
Damn.
not paid immediately, the property that he owned across the street, 2077 Fifth Avenue, would be sold at auction. Mr. McMullen, used to his clients' last-minute rescues, waited hopefully. On February 3rd, the scheduled auction day, no Collyer brother appeared, and the auction moved forward. The IRS agents even delayed it for an hour, but then they offered the building up for bid. But no bids were offered. No one wanted a crumbling, rat-infested, tax-delinquent building. And with no bidders, the government itself claimed the property. Yet even they seemed reluctant to possess it. Between the $3,000 in unpaid city taxes and the building's ruinous condition, ownership was more of a liability than a prize. And the building was in such poor condition that it hardly seemed worth the effort. And just a quick note, the Collyer brothers never handed over the keys.
Just so y'all know, before you continue, I just did the conversion on that 1900. Just on 1900 that you mentioned was about $35,000.
Yeah, he hadn't paid his taxes in 12 years.
So, and then double that because you just said 3,000 because of the interest. So basically, about 70 grand owed on that.
Exactly. Now, 3 years later, in July of 1946, patrolman Daniel Pesk and John Collyer caught two intruders stripping plumbing from the 2077 Fifth Avenue house. And in the scuffle, Collyer fell through a rotten floorboard, injuring his leg. But one suspect was caught, and the police sought Langley's cooperation to prosecute the thieves. And Langley, speaking through the locked door, refused to cooperate. And at first, he even refused to open the door. And only under the threat of subpoena did he appear in court. On July 27th, the mystery man of Harlem materialized in felony court. He was dressed in turn-of-the-century clothes, hair wild, and his manner was a little prickly. He was there to swear out the complaint, and he insisted that he and his brother still owned that building. "My invalid brother, Homer Les Collyer, and I still own that house," he declared. "The government seized it on the false contention that we owed income tax. We will sue to get it back, and they cannot demand income when we had no income." Okay. It was the third time he had gone to court to swear out a complaint against intruders, and each time he appeared briefly like a ghost from another age, and then vanished back into the brownstone labyrinth. Now, the last confirmed sighting of either brother came during a dispute over 2 parcels of land in Queens that they had inherited from their father. The city wanted the land for new streets. Langley and McMullen, his now completely exhausted attorney, met with the city's Corporation Council in October of 1946, but refused 2 summonses to testify. The land was condemned, and the brothers were awarded $7,500, but it was money that they would never see. The city promptly claimed it against the $27,000 in back taxes.
God.
And so even this, the last of the inheritance, slipped through their fingers. And by now, their only steady connection with the wider world was said to be a crystal radio set. Its faint crackle and hiss, bringing in fragments of voices from beyond their barricades. The brothers were ghosts of their former self. And by the late 1940s, Homer, blind and increasingly frail, relied entirely on Langley for sustenance. Langley, who had spent decades scavenging the streets of Harlem, now spent almost every waking moment navigating tunnels that he had dug through the mountains of debris. Their home was stacked from floor to ceiling with newspapers, pianos, broken appliances, and all kinds of cast-off objects, each piled with obsessive precision and precarious balance.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Somebody put it in the Chad put it in the comments. Music. Pissing the night away. I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Jesus.
And then in March of 1947, the city became aware that something had gone terribly wrong. Neighbors complained that a stench, more foul than normal, had begun to emanate from the house.
Uh-oh.
This wasn't just a bad odor from garbage or from a dead rat in the alley. It was pervasive, tangible, and it lingered in the air like a warning. On the morning of March 21st, 1947, it all began. It was exactly 8:53 a.m. when the New York City Police Department received a call from a man identifying himself as Charles Smith. His voice carried a mixture of urgency and disgust. The voice told the desk sergeant, "There's a dead body inside the Collyer house." And the caller offered no further detail and immediately hung up. Got something you need to say, Blake?
No, it's just
Okay.
Our people in the effing comments, Sheller,
Okay.
they said more foul than normal. Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh no, Homer shit himself.
Oh, you just wait. Now, this call was like many the police had fielded over the years. An anonymous voice reporting that someone had died in the Collyer house. And the police, weary of the hoaxes, were obliged to respond nonetheless. So they sent a single officer to check it out. The officer arrived, pounded on the door, and got no response, just like always. The officer then attempted to open the door and found it impassable. So he called for Emergency Squad 6. And by 10 a.m., Police Emergency Squad 6 had rolled up the 2078 Fifth Avenue home. The once stately brownstone. The facade was now crumbling. It was just a crumbling building that seemed to sag beneath the weight of its own secrets. And other officers were already on the scene. And a crowd had already gathered, whispering and craning for a glimpse. They were drawn as much by curiosity as by the strange, moldering presence of the house itself. And the crowd continued to grow to over 600 people, pressing against police cordons, whispering, laughing, watching, and waiting. The officers attacked the rusty iron grill of the basement door with crowbars and axes. They removed it from its hinges only to find the entrance sealed tight, packed floor to ceiling with a solid mass of debris. Not furniture, not boxes, just rubble, just junk and trash pressed together like a wall.
Wow.
Yeah, take a look at that. The house resisted them at every turn, an entire fortress of junk sealing the house from within. And at first, there seemed to be no immediate entry. Windows were shuttered, doors were barricaded with piles of furniture and debris, and when they tried to enter, they discovered something extraordinary. The house was nearly impassable. Stairs were buried beneath tons of junk. Hallways had become narrow tunnels, and rooms that should have been open and airy were compressed by towers of possessions, some of them teetering like precarious skyscrapers inside the home. And at 12:10 p.m., using ladders from the fire department, Patrolman William Barker climbed to the second-story window, smashed the glass, and slipped inside. Minutes passed until finally Barker returned to the window. He was pale-faced and shaken, and when he reappeared, he called down, "There's a DOA here." Detective John Lowry climbed up to confirm. And there, amid the heaps of rotting paper and rusting tin, in a room that was barely accessible, was the emaciated body of a white-haired man in a tattered gray bathrobe, sitting upright. His body was skeletal, his face slack, and his form was frozen as if in mid-breath. And it was Homer Collyer. The medical examiner estimated that he had been dead about 10 hours. The cause? Arterial sclerotic heart disease, malnutrition, and complications related to his blindness and immobility. And for hours, the police worked their way through this impossible space. They had to crawl and dig and carefully remove obstructions just to make progress. And each step was dangerous. Every pile of debris was a potential trap. And officers later described it as navigating a collapsed building, but one built by human hands with intention and obsession. But Langley was nowhere to be found. "Do you think he's in there?" one woman whispered, clutching her coat against the cold wind. "Dead, most likely," another man muttered, his eyes fixed on the shuttered windows. And inside, the search began in earnest. A ladder was slung across from adjoining rooftops, and officers crept over it like burglars, prying open skylights and dropping into the stifling darkness. The air inside was heavy, foul, and barely breathable. They smashed open windows to let in light and oxygen. And then one by one, they began to dig. And what followed was not so much an investigation as it was an excavation. The next day, March 22nd, police planned a top-to-bottom search, starting from the roof. By then, the crowd had swollen to several thousand, and at one point, a man with a shovel began digging in the front yard, hoping to uncover buried treasure. The police dragged him away, but the sense lingered that inside the house, there were riches, and perhaps even a fortune. Now, on March 24th, Emergency Squad 6 began clearing the top floor, tossing the debris into the yard. There's the top floor. That's the fourth floor. Take a good look at those windows.
Wow.
Holy crap.
From the windows and the rooftop, they tossed a surreal cascade of endless oddities. A gas chandelier, rusted bicycle, kerosene stove, a doll carriage, dressmaking dummies, a folding carriage top, and countless bundles of newspapers. And neighbors pressed forward, cheering and jeering as the objects fell into the yard. "Look at that," someone shouted as a child's chair clattered to the pavement. "Maybe the treasure's next," another yelled, craning his neck. The days that followed were like peeling back layers of madness. Each morning, searchlights illuminated the yard as fresh debris rained down. The danger grew with each hour. Hidden within the house were traps, logs, pipes, and heavy bundles balanced so precariously that one wrong touch would send them crashing down on the officers. So the officers moved cautiously, crawling through narrow tunnels, calling out to each other in the gloom, "Careful, don't touch that beam, it'll go." They also called out, "Langley, are you in here?" But their voices echoed, unanswered. And by March 26th, there was still no sign of Langley. The wind blew the
Jesus.
old newspapers down the streets, and they were snatched up by the crowd as souvenirs. That day's haul included a nursery refrigerator, a beaded lampshade, a box of toy tops and a toy airplane, and the chassis of the fabled Model T Ford, confirming the long-standing rumors. There was also a human skeleton and pickled medical specimens in jars. And as always, more newspapers. Tons of them. But still, no Langley. On March 27th, the searchers found the weapons: revolvers in a cigar box, a shotgun, rifles, a bayonet, and even a cavalry saber. The brothers, it seemed, had armed themselves for a siege that never came. 16 policemen worked tirelessly, sorting what seemed valuable from what was worthless. Crates of papers and ledgers were sent to the station house for safekeeping. And when night fell, Inspector Joseph Goldstein ordered the men into the basement. And there they found sagging bookcases stuffed with over 2,000 law and engineering texts. And astonishingly, 5 pianos. There was also a cracked mantelpiece, a generator, a worn RCA radio. Artifacts of an era, now all swallowed by dust. By the way, that man is standing on piles of debris. That is his head next to the ceiling.
Damn. And there is not a hazmat suit in sight. You know they were covered in filth while they were doing that.
Well, dude, this is like the late 1940s.
I know. I'm
I
saying,
didn't know anything about that.
Well, no, I'm saying, but they're covered in filth at this point.
So I'm not laughing at the situation. Somebody just put in the comments, you can never have just one piano.
Now, in the basement, officers found a cache of 34 bank books from various savings institutions, and the balances totaled just over $3,000. Not wealth, but not poverty either. It was proof that the brothers had money, even though they lived in squalor. Meanwhile, sightings of Langley flooded in. Some swore he had been seen in Brooklyn. Others claimed he had boarded a bus to Atlantic City. But each rumor proved false. "We will search until we are sure," Inspector Goldstein told the reporters. "Dead or alive, we will find him." Now, by March 28th, police chased tips from Brooklyn to Ashbury Park, New Jersey, where the brothers had once summered. But Langley was just gone, and the tension was almost unbearable. The police realized that the house might still contain life or death that they had yet to discover. Neighbors claimed Langley always entered and left via the basement door, but the police found it blocked by an old stove, umbrellas, newspapers, a gas mask canister, a stovepipe, and a broken scooter. And rats darted through the piles. Outside, the neighborhood began to gather. And Harlem was no stranger to spectacle, but nothing like this. Curious children peered over fences and adults craned their necks. Vendors arrived with peanuts and lemonade, sensing that a public show was forming. And by the end of the day, the brownstone had transformed from a private fortress to a public theater.
Jesus.
And in the days that followed, police and cleanup crews methodically cleared rooms corridor by corridor. They removed truckload after truckload of junk stacked so high that it bent floors. They cleared out tins of preserved food and broken furniture and countless other artifacts of a life hoarded and contained. And the police found more booby traps, cans, and massive tree limbs rigged to fall on intruders. Yeah, they used everything.
Jesus Christ!
Like
I mean that was straight up like Home Alone, Kevin McAllister type stuff. I mean they were very determined. I'll say that.
Yes.
I've got more to say. I'm not going to jump your story at all. I've got more
Okay.
to say. We'll do the discussion portion.
We're about to wrap
But-
it up.
Yeah.
Now, Deputy Chief Inspector Conrad Rothengast reported that Langley was most likely dead. He had never been away from that home more than 24 hours, and Homer's death would have prompted him to contact someone. On April 1st, Homer's funeral was held at Cypress Hills Cemetery. Of 53 attendees, only 2 were neighbors who had known him. McMullen attended, hoping Langley might appear, but he did not. On April 7th, workers had removed 103 tons of rubbish.
Jesus.
103
Jesus.
tons of rubbish.
Holy crap.
Wait, hold on. To put it in comparison, how much? And I'm not. And how much did we clean out with the dumpster? What was that? What was our total? Was it 8?
Well, say
I'm just trying to put it in comparison.
A ton is 2,000 pounds, right?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to figure out like how many dumpsters we would have had to have helped fill.
I don't know.
I don't remember how much it was.
Yeah, but by
8.5. Oh, 8.5. We did 8.5. It's in the comments. 8.5.
Pitiful.
Imagine doing over 10
From March 23rd to April the 7th, workers had removed 103 tons of rubbish.
God,
Detective Charles Myers of the Missing Persons Bureau spoke the words that many feared. Everything points to Langley being dead in the building. The autopsy of Homer had shown an empty stomach with no food or liquid. And Homer died from lack of care, Myers said. And then he continued his statement. Langley would never have let that happen if he were alive.
Yeah.
The next day, April 8th, the truth was uncovered. After 17 more tons of debris were removed from the second floor. Detective Joseph Whitmore spotted it. A foot protruding from the rubble. That afternoon, after removing the debris, Detective Whitmore emerged from the house and told the reporters to follow him to a nearby drugstore. And from there, he called headquarters. We've got him. Langley Collyer had been found. I'm going to give you this warning. This next picture is an actual historic crime scene photo, and it's graphic and it depicts a human in a state of decomposition. And we're showing this not to sensationalize it. We want you to understand how this man was missed in all of this debris. So after weeks of clearing the debris, Detective Joseph Whitmore and Detective John Lowry found Langley's body. Do you see a man in that picture?
Wow.
Barely. Holy crap.
His body was wedged in a 2-foot wide tunnel in the same second floor room, only 8 feet away from where Homer had died.
Wow.
Wow.
His head was turned towards his brother's cot. He lay on his right side, partially decomposed, and had been gnawed by rats.
Oof.
He had become trapped beneath a piano, a suitcase, 3 metal bread boxes, and bundles of newspaper that had collapsed on him, trapping him in his own snare. And he had suffocated. Rats had feasted on his remains. And this was weeks before Homer ever took his final breath. The irony was unbearable. Langley, the architect of the traps, had fallen victim to them himself. And Langley had died first, attempting to crawl through a tunnel to bring food to his brother. Homer, that's the tunnel he was found in. Homer, isolated and helpless, could do nothing to help Langley. He heard his muffled breathing and had to sit and listen to his brother die.
Damn.
And this left Homer to face his imminent death alone. And the very home that had offered safety, identity, and control had become their death trap.
Wow.
Now, on April 10th, medical examiner Thomas A. Gonzalez estimated he had been dead at least 2 weeks, possibly 4, from starvation or suffocation.
Damn.
And Homer died later from dehydration and malnutrition. On April 11th, Langley was buried beside his brother at Cypress Hills, and 40 mourners attended. The Reverend Dr. Charles T. Bridgman of Trinity Church presiding. And the brothers were again together, in death, if not in life. And then the media descended. Newspapers across New York City ran sensational headlines. 140 tons of junk in Harlem mystery house. Hermit brothers found dead in trash palace. New York's most peculiar hoarders perish in home of horror. Illustrations depicted the brothers with wild hair and long beards, half buried in the mountains of debris. Columnists speculated about hidden fortunes, secret stashes of valuables, and the bizarre devices Langley's had constructed. And the brownstone became a spectacle again. People lined Fifth Avenue to watch the cleanup. Vendors sold food to gawkers, and photographers snapped images of the pile-strewn interiors before authorities finally cleared it. And attorney McMullen told the press the brothers' assets, bank accounts, and real estates were worth only about $100,000, dispelling the myth that they were multimillionaires. A month later, Housing and Building Commissioner Robert F. Wagner Jr. declared the house a distinct menace to health and ordered it cleared for demolition. On June 30, 1947, the Supreme Court Justice J. Edward Lombard signed the demolition order citing rotted roof beams and sagging floors, and the Collyer Mansion was torn down. Today, where the brownstone once stood, is a small park. Children run across the grass, unaware of the labyrinthian tragedy that once existed beneath their feet. The brownstone was gone, but the Collyers did not vanish. They became shorthand in New York for a dangerously cluttered home. Firefighters still use the term a Collyer mansion to describe a hoarder residence. And their story inspired novels and plays and television shows and even pop culture references on The Simpsons and Law and Order. Homer and Langley's tragedy became public theater, and the Collyer Brothers became legends almost overnight. But beyond the spectacle, there are lessons that transcended the lurid headlines. Their story isn't just about extreme hoarding. It's about isolation, obsession, and the slow, almost invisible way that life can narrow you until it traps you. But perhaps the most enduring part of their legacy is psychological. The Collyer Brothers became early examples of what we now recognize as a hoarding disorder, a condition rooted in trauma, anxiety, and the need for control. And they remind us that hoarding is not laziness or eccentricity alone. It is a mental health issue with very real consequences. And their deaths were tragic, but they also forced society to confront these behaviors in a way that influenced future research, awareness, and even influenced urban safety practices. And finally, their story is human. At its core, it is about the impulses we all share to hold on, to protect, to create order in a chaotic world. And most of us will never stack a house full of newspapers or pianos, but we will all struggle with what to keep and what to release. The Collyers' lives were magnifies these struggles to extremes, and yet their choices are easily recognizable. And while their stories endured for decades, not just because of the sheer strangeness of their lives and deaths, it's because it touches on something deeper: the human capacity for retreat, obsession, and for building walls, both physical and psychological. Langley and Homer's world shrank year by year, their possessions closing in around them until there was no room left for life itself. Yet beyond the sensational headlines and the grotesque inventory of their belongings, the Collyer Brothers remain at their core. Two human beings caught in a spiral they could not escape. And their tale is cautionary, but also profoundly human. A mirror, reflecting the small ways we all hoard, hide, and struggle to balance connection with solitude. And it is also a reminder that behind every locked door and shuttered window, there may be a history, a heartbreak, that the outside world will never fully understand. So, what do you think of the Collyer Brothers, gentlemen?
I'd never heard that story before. That was very interesting.
Well, I think it kind of lives out with the most bizarre true story from in New York City. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because I've actually kind of heard takes on not the Collier story, but just this narrative. The well-to-do individual who inherits, who then hoards or collects or does something like that. I've never heard it end the way that this does. And to me, this is just a very tragic, excuse me, a very tragic ending to their story. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
It's just like, what's that noise?
I didn't know what that was for a second.
Julie said, anyways,
So go ahead.
I thought you had Gabby over there.
I mean, she's here, but yeah, she's curled up on the ground. I didn't know what the fuck that was. I was like, anyways.
I think loudly. Sorry.
I don't even remember where I was going with this now. Oh, anyways, this is just a tragic story. You know, I mean, here's the thing with their story though. It's obvious that they didn't see anything wrong. Number one, number two, they didn't want any help. You know, so I can't say about their story like, oh, they'd have gotten help or something like that.
Right.
I think you would have to go back all the way to the generation before that, you know, because I think with their father leaving and everything like that, that was a pretty profound loss for them. That triggered some type of response in them to hold on to things because maybe they
were given no choice in their loss.
They were given no choice in that traumatic loss that they have. And then you add on the same thing, basically equivalent of it happening to their mother when she passes. And that just exponentially grows the psychological issues that are at hand that come with hoarding disorders,
right?
You know, or the mental health problems that come with that.
Right.
I'm not saying like in a bad way. It's just, you know, like as Shelley said at the very end, what to keep and what to let go. And in a hoarder sense, you know, they tend to hold on or keep everything for their own reasons they believe to be valid. And I'm not saying that they're not. But yeah, I think you would have to go. God, this is such a tragic story on their part. I think you'd have to back up a generation to try to resolve this to make the outcome even slightly different than what it was.
I mean, but that's how a lot of these hoarding cases start, is some sort of tragic loss. And so a heartbreak or a loss, and people who go through that almost, like I said, trigger something in their brain where they can't stand to lose anything. So they hold on to everything. And yeah, those guys, you know, on top of that, like being so isolated from the community and their eccentricities.
Told you it's hard word to say.
Yes.
Eccentricities.
Eccentricities, yes. Eccentricities. Eccentricities. You know, I think it was just kind of a perfect storm that all came together, and these dudes just, like you said, I don't think they wanted help. I think they wanted to be left alone. They wanted to live the way they wanted to live, and nobody could have helped them, period.
Yeah.
So
and I'll tell you that I was so, again, I am OCD. I like things put away. I will pack and unpack my suitcase 50 times because I like things organized. In looking at this,
Shelley was trying to figure out how to repack the house. That's what she was doing.
Actually, I was. At one point, I was. I wanted to go and clean out closets. Go, don't need this. Don't need this. The thing that I found probably the most tragic to me is the fact that Langley, in his attempt to take care of his brother, actually was the ultimate cause of his brother's death. He had everything, all of this debris collapsed on top of him. And we all know, and of course me, you know, I think in pictures. And so I have this terrible, horrible image of him underneath this pile, head turned towards his brother, talking to Homer.
Yeah.
You know, trying to reassure Homer it's going to be okay, because Homer can't see what's going on. Homer can't help him. And we all know that whenever that rats are notoriously not waiting for someone to necessarily be dead before they start to feast. And that idea that he might have been trapped and might have been able to feel himself being eaten alive, that flipped me out. And in that picture, and y'all can go back and look at it, I don't ever want to see it again. But in that picture, Langley is missing fingers. Langley is missing a foot that appears to have been gnawed off. And if you go back and you look at that really, really closely, there are parts of him that shows predation. And when I looked at that, and I looked at that picture for a long time last night, and it was horrifying to me that Homer sat there, listened to his brother, probably in pain, and could do nothing. It was just the most horrible image that I could not get out of my head.
I don't know. I'm going to give you a little reprieve on that, like or a little reprieve in your brain on that. I don't know if somebody would be able to survive as long as you think that he might have survived in that state. And the only reason why I say that is because,
It's the rule of threes. 3 hours with 3 minutes without air. 3 days without. I think it's 3 days without food.
Water?
No, 3 days without water. Yeah, and 3 weeks without food.
Yeah, but I think what I think that you're not taking into account is the potential pressure that would have been on his chest and the impact from the stuff. Because if we're talking 103 tons of stuff, and I'm not going to call it trash. To us, it's going to be trash, but to them, it's their treasures. 103 pounds of stuff was taken out of their brownstone.
140 in total.
140 in total. So when something of that magnitude, it falls on an individual, these things are going to be stacked to the floor or to the ceiling, from floor to ceiling. We know this was a brownstone. We know that they were wealthy. We know that they had money. At one point, the family did. Maybe they didn't, but the family did. So we know that these are going to be taller ceilings. So we're probably looking at 9-foot ceilings, let's say, or whatever.
At least.
So you're talking a potential of a lot of weight on a person.
Right.
So I don't think that this individual, I'm not saying that his brother wouldn't have heard him die. He wouldn't have been able to talk to you. I'm not saying any of that. I do think some of that would take place, but I do believe that the weight of the trash on top of him would have taken him out a lot sooner than we believe that it would have. And then therefore, I don't think that he would have been subjected to this feeling of being eaten alive, or anything like that. Now, unfortunately, his brother is going to have to sit there and listen to rats gnawing on his body. But I don't think that Langley himself felt that process, because I believe that the weight more than likely crushed him to death over an eventual amount of time.
Well, Langley was there. Go ahead.
Say it was a piano that fell on him, right? Isn't that what they said was a piano? What else was it? It was a piano.
Again, there were pianos, stacks of newspaper, cans, all kinds of things and it was the booby trap. It was set to collapse on someone.
I mean, if it was a piano, I think that was lights out pretty instantly. If it fell on him and probably crushed him and squeezed air out of his lungs.
Did I miss that or something? It was a piano that fell on him?
He got Looney Tuned, and
see, that's a great way of putting it, Chad. It would have been like an anaconda squeezing him tighter with each breath. I agree, because I think the weight, your lungs are only going to be so powerful to be able to push or to be able to pull air into to be able to expand. So I think with every breath that he breathed out, that restriction is going to get tight. That's kind of what I'm saying, is the weight on top of him would have gotten tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until, unfortunately, he would not have been able to breathe. And at that point, he would only been able to last a mere 3 minutes at most.
Well, and you got to remember that in all of this, and I didn't point this out because I figured everybody would get it, the smell that was reported coming from the house was Langley. It was not Homer. Homer would have been dead for 10 hours.
Yeah, he wasn't dead long.
So Langley was there long enough to decay enough to have a stench that permeated the neighbors' homes as well.
And then think about Homer. Homer was he confined to a chair at that point, or was he?
Homer was frail, and he was immobile. That's all we know. He was immobile.
I was going to say, because even with him, if he was mobile and he was blind, with all that crap in there, there's no way he could have felt his way out to even find anything. So there's a lose-lose situation for both of them.
I just think that it's so horribly tragic, and I have known some people who were hoarders that I have been to their house. And I ended up cleaning out a hoarder's home.
I have a question actually for you.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you covered it. At one point you said a human skeleton was found?
It was his father's. along with the pickled organs and stuff in jars. That was all of his father's stuff that his father left.
Okay, hold on. His father's practice, not his father's actual. Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
Jesus!
yeah,
Because
from his father's practice.
in my head, I'm like, wait. We have 2 dead brothers, but we never really explained who the skeleton was.
The skeleton was from his father's medical office. Yes, that was.
Gotcha.
And it was a human skeleton. And because he was a gynecologist, there were actually rumored. I did see a picture of the skeleton. Never saw a picture of that there were embryo, fetus.
Oh, so like wet specimens.
Oh,
yeah,
like
that's cool.
Oh,
yeah.
Like mine up here, like wet specimens.
Yeah, but not a happy little octopus.
I know you're talking about like babies.
Yes.
Yes.
And there were organs and
wet specimens and babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fetuses,
just all kinds of things that were that his father left behind.
So I just want to say another note on like Chad just said, the average piano weighs about 2 tons. I go back to Giles Corey that died in the Salem witch trials.
Oh yeah.
And how much weight, I mean, I tried to look it up just now, like how much weight they put on him, and they don't have a historical amount that they put on him, but he died rather quickly whenever they were adding all that weight. If you got a piano that weighs roughly about 2 tons and that's falling on somebody, that's going to do damage in and of itself. Right. You're not going to be able to breathe properly anyways. And then you add in the remainder of the weight crushing you. As Chad said, it would have been like an anaconda squeezing him tighter and tighter until he finally died. So I don't think he would have had to lay there long and suffer. Mm-hmm. Fortunately.
I hope not.
Fortunately. I'm going with that because I think the weight... Okay, my final thought is I think that Homer is the more unfortunate brother in this instance. This was not the way that I thought the story was going to turn out. I thought we were going to go another route whenever he said a human skeleton was found, but I forget that the father was a doctor. Anyways, I don't think he suffered. I don't think Langley suffered. Homer, unfortunately, yes, I do believe that he suffered because he would have had to sit there and wait to die from either starvation or dehydration, unfortunately. That part to me is sad. I think Homer's ending is more sad to me than Langley's. They're both tragic, don't get me wrong. These are just my final thoughts. But I think Langley's was rather, not maybe instantaneous, but rather quick. Just from the weight, would have done damage in and of itself, therefore making it harder for him to survive the crushing weight. And it would have ended up suffocating him to death a lot quicker than I believe that we think that it would have taken place. So, very tragic story overall. I don't think that the outcome would have been changed any differently unless the previous generation would have had addressed some circumstances with themselves or the brothers themselves. So unfortunately, I think that this is I think their fate was pretty much sealed the moment that they were born into this family, unfortunately. So very tragic story. You did a great job at telling the story wise on the narrative, but that's my final thoughts on it.
Brian, final thoughts?
I think they were a perfect storm of messed up from childhood things and from them just being kind of out there. Great
way to put it, Ryan.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, fuck off. I think that it is very unfortunate that Langley took so much precaution to take care of his brother and did everything that he absolutely could to make sure that his brother was safe, and ended up getting off by his own trap in the end. That's terrible, and I don't think that there was any help for these guys. I think that they were good. Their fate was sealed pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And my final thought is that this story to me is so tragic, but I have to tell you, I was fascinated because I'm fascinated how one can get to that point where I understand we all get cluttered rooms. Mm-hmm. We all get closets that really need to be cleaned out. You're like, yeah, I can't even get into that closet. But at some point you clean it out. And while every person goes through when they lose a loved one and they're having to go through those possessions, you tend to want to keep more than you should. And that's okay, because in a year, most people go back through it and go, oh, why'd I keep that? This is what, this is my favorite thing. And eventually it gets down to just the things that are important. But in the hoarding case, they kept it all. They were afraid to lose any part of it, almost as if by losing it, they were losing a part of the person or the person's love. And that to me is what I feel like is really the most tragic part of this. Their possessions became the things that they loved and loved them back in their own minds, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Their possessions became their life rather than actually living the life outside their walls. And with that, Blake,
I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
Everything they need to know.
Cool. Well, some of our announcements have changed, so we have a few updates to give you, actually. But we're going to start off with saying, if you want to support this show directly, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/EVP podcast. For just $5 a month, you'll unlock over 450 Patreon exclusive videos, including pre and post broadcasts, which are the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live broadcast. So you are getting an additional hour with us each week. Your support from this goes directly back to the show and towards the adventures that we get to bring you week after week. And if you are not sure about joining Patreon, try it risk-free with our 7-day free trial. Make sure you stay connected with us. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and many more by searching Everything Vaguely Paranormal and looking for the green sound wave. Remember, you can catch us live every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube. If you'd like to meet us in person, we have updates. Your choices are no longer dwindling. If you didn't hear last week, we made the announcement, and now that it's finally revealed, I am here to tell you I am your mystery guest for the Equinox Expo in Joliet, Illinois this Saturday, September the 20th. It is an entire expo full of holistic healers, readers, and the likes. And yes, the bougie blonde will be in attendance with me.
Unfortunately for him.
And tickets can be found at the Equinox Expo Facebook event through Deidre Sanford. September 27th, we will be in Independence, Missouri at the Masonic Temple with Epic VIP Events LLC with Mysterious Mike and Sam for the Parathon with Johnny Hauser, Josh Hurd, Stephanie Riley, Tori Westhoff, and many more. That event is 18 and up only. Just a reminder on that. And tickets for that can be purchased online at Eventbrite through the Mysterious Mike and Sam with a very lengthy description of everything that's going to happen that night. It's going to be a lot of fun. October 18th, we are partnering with the Gregg County Historical Museum in Longview, Texas to lead their annual Haunted Walk downtown, where we lead you around and tell you all the stories about why downtown Longview, Texas is so haunted. Afterwards, we'll be leading an investigation on the inside of the Gregg County Historical Museum, and tickets for that will be on sale after this podcast tonight at 10 p.m. So November 22nd, just announced, you're hearing it right here for the first time. We will be at the KMFA Austin studio in Austin, Texas for the Strange and Extraordinary Fest 2025, along with the Theories of Third Kind podcast, Indie Para House, Night Owl podcast, Brandon Hodge, and of course, our good friends Damian Shalacy and Nicole Ricardo with the Parapeculiar Museum of Haunted Items. Tickets for that can be purchased at strangeandextraordinaryfest.com. We do have one more possible appearance in Texas that we will let you know about once we can confirm the details. So make sure you subscribe to our Eventbrite page as well to be notified when those public investigation tickets go on sale. We do have one ticket left for the 2-night event at the Old Park Hotel in October. And y'all, their activity is going nuts right now. Go watch the video of the door slamming and the girls screaming and running down the hallway on their Facebook page. Matter of fact, go follow Old Park Hotel on Facebook, on YouTube. Share their videos.
Become their Patreon member.
Absolutely. Well, to make all of this easier, we've added all of these links to our link tree, which will be on the Everything Vaguely Paranormal Facebook and X profiles Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, as well as in all of our show notes for you audio listeners. Or you can search linktr.ee/Everything Vaguely Paranormal. We are grateful for your continued support. Every like, comment, share, and download keeps the adventures alive. So if you have a favorite episode, share it with your friends. And one of the easiest things you can do to help us out on our show is our rankings. If you have a Spotify account, head over there and simply download our episodes and leave us a review while you're at it. That is it. 2 simple things. But if you have a story, comment, or question, or you'd like to be a guest on the show or have us as guest on your show, email us at the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Go like, share, and subscribe to that YouTube page and hit that thumbs up.
We have one more ticket, Chad, to answer your question.
One more ticket? I love that. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight on Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Thank you for being here. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.